time debt. In the year 2189, no one paid with money anymore. They paid with time. Not metaphorically. Not in sayings like, time is money, or, you owe me 5 minutes. No, actual, measured time. Extracted, stored, traded. The system called it temporal equity. Most people just called it the ledger. Every human being was born with a base allocation, 80 years, digitally embedded at the moment of genetic confirmation. Life expectancy became less about biology and more about economy. If you wanted food, shelter, medicine, you paid in minutes. Want to ride the mag rail? That'll be 30 seconds. Need a week of antibiotics? 2 months. Education? 3 years minimum. Most people never reached old age. They didn't run out of health. They ran out of time. Micah Renner had always played it safe. He kept to routine, lived modestly, worked as a temporal claims analyst for the Bureau of Time Management, a dull job but stable. He reviewed requests for time extensions, calculated penalties for overdrafts, and approved or denied appeals based on system guidelines. He was, by all accounts, a by-the-book kind of man, and he had 71 years, 2 months, and 13 days remaining, well above average for his age group. That was before the call. He remembered the time exactly, 7:42 a.m., a Tuesday, the kind of grey morning that offered no hints of catastrophe. He was drinking synthetic coffee and reviewing a routine debt transfer request when his wristband buzzed. The screen lit up. Alderson Memorial Children's Hospital. Micah's heart skipped. His son, Orion, had been admitted overnight for what doctors assumed was a mild respiratory virus. Nothing serious. Children got sick all the time. It wasn't supposed to be anything. But the voice on the line was measured. Too calm. There's been a complication, the doctor said. Orion's condition deteriorated rapidly. It's autoimmune. Aggressive. Micah could barely speak. What does that mean? It means he needs treatment immediately. Gene therapy. Immune recalibration. We have the protocols. But the pause told him everything. How much? He asked. 6 years, the doctor said, for full protocol. 7 to cover recovery. Micah went cold. 7 years. From his own ledger. There was no other donor. Orion didn't qualify for pediatric credit, and Micah's ex-wife, Orion's mother, had overdraft years ago. She had less than a year left. She couldn't give him anything. It had to be Micah. The hospital sent the contract. He stared at the numbers blinking on his screen. Transfer, 7 years recipient. Orion Renner remaining balance, SD64Y2M13D, 57Y2M13D. He hovered over the accept icon, heart pounding. 7 years. Time he'd earned by playing it safe, by saying no to vacations, to luxury, to indulgence. 7 years of morning light and evening silence. 7 years of breath. 7 years of being. He thought about Orion's eyes. Bright. Curious. About the way he asked questions that had no answers. About how he still believed in things, like fairness, and magic, and stars. Micah accepted the transfer. The pain was immediate. A deep, cellular ache. Like something inside him shrank, coiled tighter, receded. The wristband pulsed as the years recalibrated. And just like that, a full decade of his future was gone. Orion survived. The gene therapy worked. The hospital discharged him 4 days later, bouncing with energy and unaware of what had happened. Micah smiled through the exhaustion. He never told his son about the transfer. But things changed. Micah began to notice the difference. Not just physically, though there was that too. A strange stiffness in his joints. Slower recovery from minor injuries. But the deeper change was more insidious. People looked at him differently. When he applied for a promotion, his supervisor politely reminded him of his new time balance. "We typically reserve managerial roles for those with at least 65 years remaining," she said with a smile. "Longevity suggests long-term value." He tried to dispute it. "You just shaved off your potential," she said gently. "You've made a noble sacrifice, Micah. But the system is about return on investment." He was 37, but now he was discounted, less employable, less desirable. It didn't matter why his time was gone. It only mattered that it was. He found himself checking his remaining balance obsessively, watching the numbers tick down second by second. Shower, -5 minutes. Grocery scan, -7. Transit delay, -15. Time bled. Constantly. And yet, every night, when Orion climbed into his bed, hugged his stuffed synth tiger, and asked Micah to read one more story, he felt something anchor him, a kind of peace that defied math. Still, peace didn't pay the bills. The debts started to grow. Micah had never been late on a time tax before, but now the interest piled fast. He took on extra work, reviewing low-level appeals, auditing flagged accounts. The hours dragged. His ledger shrank. And then came the second letter, a notice from the Department of Familial Equity. It stated that since Orion had survived a Class 3 medical intervention, his temporal allocation adjustment required reassessment. Due to Micah's donation and the state-sponsored health support Orion had received, the system now viewed Orion's life as a shared asset. Micah was no longer listed as his sole guardian. The system had claimed partial ownership. Ravian stared at the line that changed everything. Co-stewardship activated. Future time decisions subject to review. He tried to fight it. Filed appeals. Demanded transparency. But the system didn't respond to outrage. It responded to balance sheets. His son's time now belonged, in part, to the state. And Micah? He was just another debtor. Micah stopped checking his time balance. Not because he no longer cared, but because he cared too much. The numbers had begun to feel like a countdown, a drumbeat marking the slow erosion of his existence. Every glance at the display was a reminder that he was less than he had been. Less viable, less valuable, less free. At first, he thought he could catch up, work harder, sacrifice more. But the system wasn't designed for redemption. It was a machine that ran on forward motion, on continual productivity. And once you slipped beneath a certain threshold, the slope became steeper, faster. He started waking up tired. Dreams blurred at the edges. He saw flashes, strange corridors, ticking clocks, voices without mouths. Side effects, the hospital had said. Nothing major. Just minor neurological fatigue common in high-transfer donors. But Micah knew better. He was being drained. Orion, on the other hand, thrived. His immune system stabilized. He returned to school. He smiled more, laughed louder. He asked questions about space again, about time. "Is time real, Dad?" he asked one night, curled beneath his synth fabric blanket. Micah hesitated. What do you mean? I mean, if I close my eyes and imagine something for a long time, and when I open them it feels like no time passed, does that mean I kept it for myself? Micah wanted to say yes. Instead, he said, sometimes. But Orion's time wasn't his anymore. Not entirely. Since the co-stewardship activation, every decision Micah tried to make for his son was flagged by the system. New school supplies? Pending authorization. Birthday weekend off-grid? Denied. Inefficient time expenditure. Medical checkup? Approved. Time deduction scheduled. He was raising a child whose minutes were co-owned by an algorithm. Desperate, Micah sought legal help. But legal help required time. Consultations, document reviews, hearings, all charged by the hour. Literal hours. No lawyer would take on a case for someone with under 50 years remaining. Statistically non-lucrative, one had explained. Then came the audit. 2 agents from the Bureau of Temporal Oversight arrived at his apartment. Identical suits. Identical smiles. They spoke in soft tones but carried devices that shimmered with extraction protocols. Routine compliance check, one said. They scanned his home, his wristband, his storage terminal. They asked about unauthorized time-sharing, off-grid banking, black market chronotrading. Micah had heard rumors about those things. About people who sold stolen seconds in alleyway exchanges. People who uploaded moments of joy or pain for others to experience. Emotional currency. But he'd never participated. Never dared. Still, the agents left a notice on his door. You are under temporal review. It was a polite way of saying, we're watching you. Closely. That night, Micah sat in the dark and stared at the shard of time left in his band. 51 years. He was 38. At this rate, he'd be bankrupt by 50. He did what he hadn't done in months. He opened the deep ledger. It was a hidden network, illegal, encrypted, accessible only through backdoor patches and legacy systems. A place where people offered services and made trades outside the system's view. Most of it was garbage. Scams. Desperate people offering 5 minutes for love letters, 10 for fake IDs. But one post caught his eye. Slow time buyer need long-form memory engrams. Must be real. Payment in years. Micah read it twice. Engrams were snapshots of experience, recorded thoughts, sensations, memories. The system didn't allow personal engram sales. Too risky. Too permanent. But in the deep ledger, buyers existed. People with years to spend and lives too empty to feel. He hesitated. And then he recorded. Not the pain. Not the fear. But a moment, just one, when Orion was 3 and had fallen asleep in Micah's lap during a thunderstorm. The window lights had danced across the walls. The silence had been soft, safe. Micah had never felt more human. He uploaded the memory. The buyer responded within minutes. Transaction complete. Plus 3 years. Micah stared at his balance. 54. He felt sick. But also relieved. For the first time in months, he wasn't sinking. So he sold another. A slow dance with his first love. A moment of standing in the rain as a teenager, laughing for no reason. The memory of watching Orion take his first steps. Each one worth something. Each one taken. He didn't feel the loss at first. The memories faded gently, like old photographs left in sun. But over time, the absence grew louder. He remembered the facts, but not the feeling. The sound of Orion's baby laugh became distant, muffled. His own smile in the mirror no longer matched the warmth he once associated with certain thoughts. He was hollowing himself out, but his balance was climbing, and the system no longer flagged him. The oversight notice was removed. He was eligible for job upgrades again. A recruiter contacted him about a mid-tier claims supervisor role. "Your numbers have stabilized," she said cheerfully. "Good trend line." Micah accepted the position, and never told anyone what he'd done. But Orion noticed. "You don't look the same when I tell jokes," he said one morning. Micah blinked. "What do you mean?" "You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes." Micah knelt beside him. "I'm just tired, buddy." Orion looked at him. "Did someone take something from you?" Micah froze. He wanted to say no. Instead, he said, "A little. But it was a gift. To me. To you. And maybe to someone who needed it more than I did." Orion hugged him tightly. "Then I hope they remember it forever." Micah closed his eyes. He didn't know if the buyer could even feel what he had sold, if the memory had meaning outside of its origin. But he hoped so. God, he hoped so. Micah stopped measuring his life in years. Now, he measured it in trades. One dream for 2 weeks. A childhood laugh for 3 months. A first kiss for just under a year. He became fluent in the grammar of loss. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Memory by memory. Like peeling the bark from a tree until only the pale wood beneath remained, still standing but exposed. Vulnerable. And yet, the system smiled. His balance climbed. 57 years. Then 60. 62. Enough to make him visible again. Marketable. He received offers. Consultancies. Invitations. Even romantic attention, though he declined all of it. People saw a man with time, not the cost. They didn't know that much of what he had left wasn't really his. He had joined a closed network called Grey Loop, where trades were cleaner, faster, and far less legal. In Grey Loop, time wasn't just sold, it was harvested, laundered, repurposed. Some offered ghost years, synthetic time with unstable metadata. Others sold skins, full experience templates that could overwrite a tired mind, offering temporary euphoria at the cost of identity drift. Micah avoided the deep end, but he knew it was only a matter of time, because now it wasn't about keeping up, it was about staying human. He began to forget simple things. Orion's 3rd birthday, the smell of his grandmother's kitchen, the reason he had once loved rain. He kept a journal to track what remained. Simple entries. Orion prefers red socks. I was once married to someone named Lyra. My father's name might have been Joel. He wasn't sure about that last one. But worse than forgetting was the hollowness that came with remembering something only because it was written down. He started seeing a woman named Mara. Not romantically. She was a memory engineer, someone who cleaned corrupted timelines for elite clients. Micah met her through a Grey Loop intermediary who owed him a favor. Mara was quiet, perceptive, and unapologetically blunt. "You're leaking," she said during their first session. Micah raised an eyebrow. "Leaking?" She pointed at the neural scan. "You've created so many gaps that your identity matrix is fragmenting. Your mind is compensating by generating false connections. Phantom context. In plain terms, you're filling the holes with fiction. Eventually, you won't know which parts of you are real." He stared at the scan. The gaps looked like frostbite on a nervous system. "Can you fix it?" She shrugged. "Depends. How much are you willing to pay?" He laughed dryly. "In years or truth?" "Both." He gave her 2 full years. In exchange, she ran a stabilization routine. She restored a handful of memories from backup traces in his cortical history. Simple things, like the lullaby he used to hum to Orion, or the color of the walls in his childhood bedroom. Small anchors. But they helped. Until the letter came. Another government envelope. This one colder than the rest. The Bureau of Genetic Asset Protection had reclassified Orion. Because of Micah's time donation and subsequent trades, Orion was now genetically linked to a non-stable contributor, which meant his status had been downgraded. He was no longer eligible for top-tier education. His medical access would be re-evaluated. His career options limited. Micah stormed into the Bureau's office, waited hours to speak to someone. When he finally did, the woman behind the glass simply scanned his band and gave a practiced smile. "I see you've engaged in non-sanctioned time activity. Your ledger is technically clean, but the algorithm detects behavioral volatility. That reflects on your dependence." "He's just a kid," Micah said. She nodded sympathetically. "And he'll inherit what you give him." Micah clenched his fists. "Then take me. Whatever's left. Just leave him alone." The woman tapped her console. "Not how it works, sir." He left in silence. That night, Orion asked him about stars again. "Do you think they'll still be there when I'm older?" "Yes," Micah said. "Even if I run out of time?" Micah hugged him tightly. "You won't," he whispered. "I promise." But promises cost something too. So Micah made a choice. He sold not a memory, but a name. His name. Through Grey Loop, he transferred identity metadata, occupation history, social credit, genetic health markers. In exchange, a corporate entity offered 10 years. 10 years for someone else to be Micah Renner. Legally, ethically, it was a grey zone. But in the black market, it was common. He'd remain who he was internally, but officially, on the books, he'd no longer exist. No job history. No record. No legacy. The system wouldn't punish Orion for Micah's shadow. So he signed, and watched the name disappear from his wristband. He came home a ghost, but with 10 more years to give to his son. The world didn't end when Micah Renner disappeared. It barely noticed. No alarms went off. No questions were asked. He vanished from the Bureau's ledgers like ink rinsed from a page. His apartment lease was reassigned. His employment record archived under inactive. His medical data anonymized. The name Micah Renner now belonged to someone else, someone younger, richer, designed for longevity. And Micah became a shadow with years to spare. He moved to the fringe districts, where oversight was thin and silence was thick. There, people bartered memories over campfire flames and coded the future into tattoos. They called themselves the untimed, those who had forfeited identity for freedom. Some had been doctors, engineers, teachers. Others had simply been unlucky. No one asked questions out here, because questions were currency, and no one could afford to answer them. But even in the margins, Micah had a purpose. He checked in on Orion from afar. The boy was growing fast, taller, stronger. He'd been reassigned to a Tier 3 education cluster, far from optimal, but still decent. The state-sponsored oversight committee now made decisions about his meals, his medical appointments, his sleep cycles. Orion didn't know who was pulling the strings. Micah made sure of that. But one day, as he watched through a distant feed relayed via black market drones, Orion turned to the window. Just for a second. Just a glance. And Micah swore. The boy looked straight at him, like he knew. Micah retreated that night to his shelter. He couldn't risk staying close. Eyes were everywhere, even here, in the dark. He thought often about what was left of him, not his memories. Many had been traded, faded, or rewritten. Not his name. He hadn't spoken it in months. Not even his face, altered subtly through time erosion therapy to avoid facial recognition. What remained was something else. A tether. A reason. He began building something, not with metal or circuits, but with time. He had saved 13 years. A precious vault. Enough to make someone else's life worth living. And he was going to give it away. Not to Orion. Not directly. That would raise too many flags. But to a girl in Orion's cohort, Nyla, age 11, time depleted due to a congenital illness. She had shown promise, creativity, compassion, the kind of traits the system no longer prioritized. Micah arranged it through Grey Loop, a blind transfer to her name. No trace. No return. The next week, Nyla was reassigned to a top-tier educational pod. Orion was moved with her. The two became friends. Micah watched from afar, his balance dropping with each second, each heartbeat. 12 years. 10. 7. He started to feel it in his bones, in the way light moved slower, how his thoughts came duller. He kept writing in the journal, even when his hands trembled. Orion has a new friend. He smiled today. I remember liking apples. I don't miss being known. I miss being seen. At 4 years remaining, he stopped writing. At 2, he stopped watching. And with 11 months and 6 days left on his band, he did what few dared. He approached the terminal. The terminal wasn't a place. It was a person. Old. Silent. Blind in one eye. They sat at the edge of the world, where the data streams frayed into silence. Micah offered what remained. I want to upload it, he said. Not for preservation. For release. The terminal nodded. No record? They asked. Micah shook his head. No. Let it scatter. The terminal connected the interface. No ceremony. No questions. Memories flickered across the channel. A child's laughter. A thunderstorm. The whisper of rain on synthetic glass. A voice saying, Dad, watch this. The weight of love. The terror of loss. The feeling of not being enough, and giving everything anyway. The terminal exhaled. You will not be remembered. Micah smiled. I know. But he will. The last seconds pulsed through his veins like a gentle current. And then, silence. No explosion. No collapse. Just the stillness of something finished. Somewhere, in a Tier 2 education cluster, Orion stared at the sky. He didn't know why, but he felt something shift. A quiet warmth. A presence leaving, but not gone, like a shadow stepping out of the light. He closed his eyes and whispered, Thank you.